Hi, I'm a small farmer. We need to talk bailouts. I'm seeing a lot of people talk about how small farmers are going to go under first, and that's why we need bailouts. Because if we don't have a bailout, then the big corporate farms will buy up all the small farms. As a small farmer, it's really not that simple. Let's talk about it. And if you watch till the end, we are going to talk specifically about AcreTrader because there really is a lot to unpack there. So let's get into it. How Money Works just did a great video on how we need bailouts to save small farms is a PR strategy that big farms use, right? To get money for themselves. Because if big farms say, give me money, people are going to say no. But if big farms can convince everybody that small farms are in danger and the bailout is going to save small farms, no one's going to say no to that. Because who would dare refuse a nice, small, upstanding family farmer like me? Nobody. That's why the farm lobby uses small farmers like me as a mascot, and I really wish they wouldn't. That is misleading, and it's certainly not going to help me. So let's talk about what's going on here. The farm lobby gives you a distorted version of who small farms are and what we need so they can get money from you for the big farms. So here's some reality check and what you need to know about all this talk on farm bailouts. The story of the Red River Valley has a lot to teach us about how farms actually don't have to keep getting bigger and bigger, and we do know exactly how to stop that cycle from happening. The answer will surprise you. It's just stop bailing them out. I also want to talk about this idea that small farms are going to be the ones to suffer most and suffer first in the trade war. The farms that are going to suffer the most are the big operations that grow soybeans and other bulk commodities for export. The small farm that's growing soybeans could lose a few $1,000s. But big farms can lose millions, and the bankers and investors behind them are not always forgiving. Due to our limited size and the fact that it's easier for us to pivot, small farms are actually in a much better position to ride out crises like this than the big farms. And we see that in history. We see that in the Red River Valley. So when people say we have to do bailouts to save small family farms, that's not really about small farms. That is the farm lobby holding us up as a PR tool. You really could argue that what small farms need is to just let the big guys fail already. The reason that investors love farmland so much is because we're scared to let farms fail. So there's always bailouts. That means guaranteed returns on investment. Investors and wealthy individuals love that. The fact that there's always bailouts and subsidies on subsidies is why investors have been buying up US farmland so much over the last 20 years. Bailouts are like putting out a bat signal for wealthy investors. That's why they're all here. When a lot of people with deep pockets want to buy farmland, it drives up the price. And working farmers and small farmers cannot compete. That is probably the existential question facing US agriculture right now. Will we keep treating farmland as an investment vehicle where the people who own it are not allowed to fail? Or will we have the guts to let the big guys fail and let farmland prices fall back down to where it's priced as a working asset that working people can afford and use it to raise food? We're kind of at a big fork in the road with that right now, and which one we choose is going to have huge impacts on our country's ability to feed itself. If we keep treating farms like they are too big and important to fail, we will actually have a harder and harder time feeding ourselves in this country. Right now, we're in a time when the prices for farmland, housing, and other basics have only gone up, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we have a really clear story of a time in US history when it wasn't like that. We do have a time when giant investor-owned farms were the norm, but we allowed them to fail. Small family farms actually took over after that, and believe it or not, are actually still running that area. Here's the story of the Red River Valley. Once upon a time, this part of the US was full of giant farms growing wheat. They called them bonanza farms, and they were huge. 10,000 acres was a very normal size for these things. The biggest one was 66,000 acres. That is over 100 square miles of wheat, one farm. But the bonanza farms didn't last. Within decades, they disappeared. All that's left of them today is museums. Today, the Red River Valley is mostly family farms, averaging, depending on the area, from 400 to about 1,500 acres. And I know that sounds like a big number, but the further north you go, the less each acre can grow because the growing season gets shorter and shorter, and so you need more acres to make a viable farm. And 1,500 acres is still a tenth the size of a normal bonanza farm 100 years ago. So what happened? Where did these giant farms go? Well, these bonanza farms took some big financial risks, and when they didn't pan out, the government did not bail them out. That's it. It's that simple. The people running these bonanza farms, some of which were investor-owned companies and some of which were just family farms that were very large. It was just a family with 50,000 acres. The people who were running them were there to make money. So when that didn't work anymore and they weren't getting bailouts, they just cut their losses and got out. They sold the land. That's it. So let's unpack a few more things. Something I'm seeing people say a lot is small farms are going to suffer the most from the trade war. And again, I'm not going to say all small farms are going to be just fine, but I think that is speaking to a huge misunderstanding of what small farms are. But I think the idea that small farms have the most to lose from losing the Chinese export market is really telling us, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, that people do not understand what small farms are. So let's unpack the financial risks that small farms are facing from the trade war. And I want to be clear, not every farm is the same. Some small farms are going to have a bad time with this, but that's really not the bulk of small farms. For one thing, a small farm can only lose so much money. Say the price for soybeans falls so far that every acre of soybeans loses $200. A small farm that's growing 50 acres of soybeans could lose $10,000. Which sounds life-ending, and we're going to circle back to that in a second. A large farm that is growing 5,000 acres of soybeans can lose $1 million. That's big boy money. So when we're talking about who's going to suffer the most, you have to keep in mind that small farms, the amount of money we can lose, really is literally limited by the fact that we are small. In many ways, we are protected by our small size from this stuff that's happening right now. And that actually helps explain why small family farms are the most common kind of farm in the US. People don't realize this, but almost 9 in 10 farms in the United States are small family farms. We are by far the bulk of the farm sector. Just in terms of numbers of people, in terms of the amount of food made or the land operated, no, obviously not. Small farms are the best kind of farm at hanging on through bad economic conditions. That's why we're most of the farms. Now let's get back to that thing I just mentioned where small farms losing $10,000 is not necessarily going to put them out of business. We are in a country where a lot of people cannot afford a $400 emergency, right? So $10,000, most people hear that and you're going to think that's bankruptcy money. So we need to put that in financial perspective for where small farms are at. The median small family farmer in the US is a millionaire with a 6-figure income. Let me repeat that. Most small family farmers in the United States are millionaires with a 6-figure income. And that 6-figure income is after you take out all the money you might be losing on that small farm. That's losses, expenses, debts. 6-figure income after you take all of that out. These are not people who are going to go bankrupt because of a $10,000 loss. And I know that can really throw people for a loop because we've been told our whole lives that small family farmers are struggling poor peasant folk. That is just completely out of date. Family farmers in general have made more money than non-farmers every single year since 1998. We've been told our whole lives that small family farms are being pushed out of the business. Well, after a century of pushing the poorest people out of the business, ask yourself who's left. It's not the poor people. Small family farmers today are the kind of people who could hang on through bad years. That means you have some financial ballast. You're not poor people. And that's why it is insane that we are being used as the mascot for this is why we need bailouts. I find that a lot of people also get just like really emotionally scandalized when you tell them small family farmers are mostly millionaires. I'm a small farmer and I'm not a millionaire, but understanding that about my peers and colleagues actually clears up a lot. It makes it easier for me to navigate life as a small farmer. It helps make sense of why maybe my farm doesn't look like the other small farms, right? There can be a lot of keeping up with the Joneses in agriculture. A lot of people think that the right way to farm is just however their neighbors are doing it. And so if my farm doesn't look like my neighbors, I'm doing something wrong. Well, knowing that most small farmers are millionaires helps me make sense of why my farm doesn't look like theirs. And it's a good reminder to not try and make my farming about keeping up with the Joneses. I have a certain financial situation, and it is not the same as most other small farmers, and it's okay for me to do things different because of that. As a small family farmer, knowing that I'm actually kind of on the poorer end for small family farmers really helps me with making the right choices for my farm instead of trying to farm like everybody else does. I think I'm just saying this because it's so weird to me when people get upset about having this information. Knowledge is power. Even if it's not the knowledge you expected, it's still power. So I would just say if you're experiencing some emotional angst about finding out that small farmers are not the poor little folk heroes you thought we were, you've been lied to your whole life about who small farmers are. Because it is very politically convenient for big farmers for you to believe that small farmers like me are desperate, are poor, are in need of help. That is why you believe that. It's PR. I really want people to know the reality of what's going on with small farmers, so it's harder for the farm lobby to lie to you about it. Now, once you start getting into the weeds with farms and finances, people will bring up, oh, but it's the medium-sized family farmers that are struggling the most. That is actually true. I will take a moment still to remind you that medium family farmers, also millionaires. And this is the only group of farmers that have an income level that's below the US at large. However, medium family farmers are living in rural areas with low costs of living. So they are the worst off of the family farmers, and they're still middle class. That's what's going on here. Okay, so now let's talk about big farms and how they have the most to lose from this trade war. The bailouts is all about them. Quick definition moment here. A lot of people say corporate farms. I don't find that's actually a useful thing because a lot of the farms that people think are corporate are actually family farms that are just large. It's a wealthy family with a lot of property. I think the corporate versus family division in a lot of ways is kind of a red herring. The thing I'm worried about is how does the farmer behave? How does it treat its workers? How does it treat the land? I've worked with big farms that did those things well. They're not the norm, but they do exist. And in many cases, because they have a lot of resources, they can actually pay people well. They can spend money on some environmental cleanup. So as a small farmer, I don't 100% buy into this small farms good, big farms bad thing. And to be clear, small farms can be pieces of work too. I've seen my peers in small farming cheat their workers and be bad to the environment. However, a lot of people really care about the difference between small and large farms, so I want to make sure that y'all understand what that actually means. That's what we're doing here. There was a time when I was working with farms all over the country. Let's see, I hit up about 300 farms during that time. I could count the number of actual corporate farms on one hand. Most of the farms that people call corporate are in fact family farms. The family's just large and wealthy. And I think in a lot of ways, the corporate label is cope. I think it's easier on a lot of people emotionally to just tell themselves that's a corporate capitalism problem than it is to admit that large wealthy families have been treating their workers badly for thousands of years. But that's a rabbit hole for a different day. Bottom line, the bigger the farm, the more they have to lose from the trade war. It's that simple. Whether they're a shareholder-owned corporation or a family farm that's very large, the big farms have the most to lose from the trade war. They're most likely to lose so much money that they actually go bankrupt. And that is why the farm lobby, which is mostly run by the big farms, are in a full court press and have been this entire year, waving small farmers like me in front of you because they know that they need the money, but nobody loves them enough to send it to them. There have been a lot of really interesting interviews with farmers this year. There's the one I debunked back this spring. These farmers they interviewed were in fact very large family farmers. Wired did an interview with a family farmer a few months ago. That guy was also from a large wealthy family farm. Most of the time when you see a family farmer on the news talking about how bad they have it, they are trained spokespeople. They are farmers, yes, but they are also very much trained spokespeople. There's a spokesman circuit. It's kind of like a pageant circuit where you go and you network and people decide you're a trustworthy spokesman for our agricultural interests. There's a whole network for that. That's who winds up on news interviews to talk about agriculture. We are now seeing a lot more off-the-cuff quick interviews with farmers who may not necessarily be that kind of guy. But if you still notice, a very consistent message. We love Trump, but we're hurting. Trump send us money. There's no Trump, you're a failure. There's no holding him accountable for what he's done. That's called, even though they're kind of off the cuff, they've still had the talking points. Somewhere between 1/5 and 1/3 of US farmers did not vote for Trump. And you notice how we never get on the news? We have to have a YouTube channel. Black farmers on social media talking about, listen, we've never gotten the government money, so we built our farms to not need that, and we're doing fine. People like me, we have to get our own word out there by building our own platform. We don't get called up to be interviewed on the news. If you're a different kind of farmer with different opinions that have not been vetted by the farm lobby, you have to fight to get your thoughts out there. So here we are. Thanks for tuning in. Okay, one more thing. I think a lot of why we're convinced that investors are going to buy up farmland is because we had that experience with houses in 2008. That's why it's really important to know that farmland and houses behave very differently. A house, some kind of place to live, is something that every single person needs, and it has to be where they live, right? It has to be where their job is. Farmland is a little bit different because food that you grow there, you can pick up and move. I would agree that investors are probably going to continue buying up farmland, but they're going to be buying it up in places where they can sell the products from there. Places like Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay. Places with stable governments that can keep trade agreements. That's the crazy thing about soybeans and other crops. You can literally just grow more of them in a lot of places, it turns out. So yeah, 100% investors are going to keep buying farmland, but not US farmland, because if you raise a crop here, you can't really sell it to most of the world. That means US farmland is not going to be worth having in the same way it has been. And that's going to drive investors who are buying farmland to buy it somewhere else. That is probably also going to cause US farmland prices to drop because it's not worth as much as an investment vehicle anymore. So I expect that quite a few small farmers who are not losing a lot directly from the trade war, like they weren't selling soybeans in the first place, they may still have their farmland value go down and they may be very upset about that. I think it's really important to balance that with the fact that the higher farmland prices are driven by investment, the worse it is for US agriculture. Working farmers who actually grow food cannot get farmland and grow food. There is a direct correlation between how high our farmland prices go and how hard it is for the US to feed itself. So it's kind of the same thing with housing. Housing prices going up is very good for the people who already own a home. It is very bad for the people who still need to buy one. And agriculture is something where you need to keep having new farmers coming in. That's something I think we've really not prioritized the last couple of decades. We've really put we need farmland prices to keep going up so people who bought farmland can get wealthier passively. And I think that's done some really bad things for US agriculture. So it's really important to balance that fear of falling farmland prices with the fact that it will allow us to farm. Oh, I need to turn the water on. So yeah, that's a quick thing on how farmland is not like housing. Last thing, I promised you AcreTrader, so here it is. I'm hearing a lot of people say, AcreTrader, it's going to swoop in and buy up all the farmland. There are a lot of businesses out there that invest in farmland, and I don't think any of them want farms to go bankrupt because then they have land that's worth less. You know, if somebody bought up lots of farmland after this, what are they going to do with it? You can't grow soybeans and sell them on the global market. Doesn't matter if you're a small farm or a big farm. Us in the US can't really export soybeans so much anymore. That's universal. That's across the board for all American farms. So investors who want to buy farmland are going to buy it somewhere else because you can actually use that farmland to sell things. And the people who buy farmland to turn it into houses can't do that either because our economy is not doing great. Interest rates are up. People can't buy houses right now. So like you could buy farmland and then you can't do anything with it. That's how bad this is. We have destroyed our presence on the global stage. There's not going to be a rebound in crop prices anytime soon because, I mean, imagine being a country that used to buy soybeans and other crops from the US right now. We've just proven ourselves to be incredibly unreliable trading partners who will stab you in the back when we feel like it. I wouldn't count on somebody like that for my food. I would try and buy it from someone else. The soybean market is not coming back, and the commodity export market is not coming back. And this is not even the first time in US history that farmers have done this to ourselves, destroyed our commodity market by throwing a tantrum. We don't have time to get into that right now. That is that. So I'm trying to get some info out there so we can actually try and make better decisions as a people. So don't forget to like and subscribe.